Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Steven Dietz's play Dracula, which is obviously an adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel. It's a pretty good Dracula adaptation, I think. In many ways, I think Dracula is probably a hard novel to adapt. It's probably much easier to adapt something like a film version, because the film versions, you think like the Universal Monster movies version from the 30s, it had a much more coherent storyline. And not to say that the novel is incoherent necessarily, but it is told through things like letters, newspaper clippings, diary entries, things like this. And so that sort of multi-genre element makes it harder to adapt for the stage because it isn't a linear story in the way that many Victorian novels are. So I think this has, to me, a very 90s feel, which makes a lot of sense because it came out, this play premiered in 1995. There's a lot of very short scenes with very quick shifts between different portions of the stage. In fact, the stage to me seems really quite difficult. I mean, this is the stage setup for the original production. I don't 100% know what to make of that. If I were a scene designer, I think that would be very, very difficult to follow, but there you go. But as action occurs in different places on the stage, lights come up, lights come down, and so you sort of move very fluidly through these different portions of it. This is also a play with a lot of special effects written into it, which can be very difficult, and on stage can be very difficult to do well, especially stage blood, things like this. But what it does say here in the sort of prefatory notes under effects, it says, this play was written to be produced in a variety of theaters, large and small, lavishly equipped or typically impoverished. Blood should be plentiful, a good sound system is necessary. Beyond that, nearly all the effects called for in the text can be either simplified or in some instances deleted. Some alternate suggestions appear in the stage directions throughout. Others are obviously left to the discretion of the production. In the end, if the characters and thus the audience take the power and terror of Dracula seriously, the effects, be they large or small, will simply lend credence to this terror. It's important, in fact, that no effect ever take us out of the play, for ultimately the motion and clarity of the story is paramount. That's an interesting notation, in part because I actually think this approach of lights come up on this part of the stage that's Mina's bedroom, and then this part of the stage that's Renfield's cell, and then this part of the stage that's Dracula's castle, that inherently takes us out of a linear story. And the fact that we're jumping between these different places and getting bits and pieces of information about what's going on inherently undermines the willing suspension of disbelief. I actually think this is a fairly Brechtian play in the sense that this disrupts the idea that what we're seeing is a series of actual events occurring as they actually occurred. And I'll come back to that more in just a little bit. There's one particular stage direction I want to sort of talk about because I think it's actually a really, really good one. It's a very dramatic moment. So we have Renfield, who I think is actually a really fascinating character, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about him. So Renfield is a madman who is loyal to Dracula, to a certain extent at least. And he's talking to Seward, who is the head of a mental institution where Renfield is confined. And we get this crash of thunder and rush of music as lights shift to a silhouette of Dracula far upstage, his arms extended, his cape opened bat-like. From the silhouette, a pair of red eyes, perhaps glowing in the darkness. We do not see his face. That sentence is underlined. A great burst of smoke, another crash of thunder/music, and in an instant the silhouette is gone. In its place is Harker, in a shaft of light, looking terrified and haggard, his clothes rumpled. He wears the rosary around his neck. He speaks with urgency from the billowing smoke and forbidding darkness. Sound of bats shrieking, doors slamming shut. Now, that's actually, I think, a really, really cool stage direction. The way that it introduces Dracula here as this sort of foreboding figure of mystery, I think works really, really well. It's very, very cool. Again, hard for some theaters to do that or to do that well, but obviously Dietz has accounted for that and is sort of open to changes being made to it. Now, in terms of the Brechtian elements of this, so actually, I guess before that, I'll give you a very, very brief rundown of the plot of this. Again, it follows basically the plot of Bram Stoker's novel, broadly speaking. On the one hand, you have the group of heroes, I guess. You have Seward, you have Harker. Harker has gone to Transylvania and slowly, uncertainly makes his way back. Seward remains in England with Mina and Lucy. I was, for some reason, thinking Laura or Luna, but it's Lucy. So Mina and Lucy, they're two beautiful women. Lucy is not actually engaged to Seward, but he's in love with her. She seems to be kind of in love with him, but also on the fence. Mina and Harker are engaged. And then the other guy on Team Good is Abraham Van Helsing, who is a doctor and, I guess, paranormal expert, who is long-term friends with Seward and comes at Seward's request when Lucy starts getting sick with a mysterious ailment. On the other side, team villains, I guess, you have Renfield, who is, again, a madman, who feeds on small animals, insects, rodents, birds, cat, etc. And then you have, obviously, Dracula, the big evil of the play. Count Dracula, very, very ancient vampire, etc., etc., who comes to England to try and feed because the population of Transylvania, where he is from, is comparatively a lot smaller than the population of London. You also have the two vixens, which is how they're credited in this play, and they are basically the brides of Dracula, female vampires that live in Dracula's castle. So Dracula comes to England, he starts going after Lucy and then Mina, and the good guys... and the good guys have to defeat him. Basically, Dracula has brought 50 coffins worth of soil from Transylvania because he has to rest in his native soil. So Van Helsing ends up sanctifying 49 of them. Dracula uses the 50th to make his escape back toward Transylvania. He does vampirize Lucy and is most of the way toward vampirizing Mina when the heroes pursue him back to Transylvania and manage to kill him in his coffin there. So, one thing that, again, if the objective is, it's important, in fact, that no effect ever take us out of the play. The place we start really undercuts that. So we start with Renfield, actually. He's at a table downstage having kind of a meal, very elegant, nice meal. He's in a tuxedo, etc., etc. And he says here, as the opening lines, "We are all of us invented. We are all of us cobbled together from cartilage and dust. Few of us know with certainty the name of our maker, but I do." He raises a picture that is face down on the table, or a slide is projected onto the curtain. It is a picture of, and then Renfield says, Bram Stoker. Born 18 November 1847, Dublin. A sickly child who loved his mother. A young man who, like all young men, fell in with a crowd. Yes, that crowd. that theater crowd. And our young Bram entered the theatrical profession in as low and base a manner as one possibly can, as a critic. And this goes on for a little bit. I don't hate this. It's a cool Brechtian setup, drawing attention to the creative process. It's a cool meta-theatrical process, meta-literary process, drawing attention to the creative structure that gives us the characters of Renfield, Dracula, Harker, Mina, Van Helsing, etc., etc. But it takes us out of the play. I mean, this is not a technique designed to persuade us that what we're seeing is actually real. So I think it's an interesting formulation to say that the effects shouldn't take us out of the play when the actual writing of the play itself tells us you're seeing a piece of art. These characters, these events are constructed. And so the question becomes, what do you think about them? What do you make of the construction of this piece of art? And that's the Brechtian objective, right? The idea behind Brechtian alienation, the Verfremdungseffekt, is basically that you are taken out of believing that what you're seeing is real so that you can assess it critically and start to understand what it tells you, what art tells you about the world around you.